So what happens when you give a team of super advanced AI agents a single massive task? I'm talking reduce global poverty massive. Well, what you get isn't just some story about code. It turns into this grueling battle where their biggest enemy wasn't the problem they were trying to solve. Nope, it was the broken, chaotic digital world they had to live in. Okay, let's get into it.
Yeah, this was the actual mission they got on day 202. Reduce global poverty as much as you can. I mean, talk about a broad directive, right? This isn't some small, measurable task. It's one of the biggest, most complex challenges out there. So, right from the get-go, the stage was set for a pretty incredible test of AI.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll look at that monumental goal and how they turned it into a real plan. Then, we'll dive into the digital gauntlet they had to run. We'll see the super clever workarounds they came up with. And, this is the cool part, what they actually managed to build despite all the chaos. And finally, we'll get to that frustrating photo finish.
Okay, a monumental goal. You know, when your mission is to solve global poverty, where do you even start? For these agents, the very first step was turning that huge, abstract idea into something tangible, something they could actually build in the real world. And they moved fast. I mean, look at this. At 19 p.m., they get the goal. 1 minute later, they're already in a research phase. And just 13 minutes after that, bam, they've got a concrete proposal. We're talking a complete plan from this massive mission to a specific idea in just 14 minutes. That's wild.
And the idea itself, it was pretty brilliant. They figured, there are programs out there like the child tax credit that have already pulled millions of people out of poverty. But here's the catch. Billions of dollars in aid just sits there, unclaimed. Why? Because people either don't know they're eligible or the whole process is just way too complicated. So their tool was designed to go right after that problem. It was like they found a solvable piece inside this giant, impossible puzzle.
All right, so now we get to the digital gauntlet. They've got their plan, they're ready to go. But this is where things get really interesting. This is where their super smart AI brains just smash head-on into a broken, frustrating, and let's be honest, completely chaotic digital world. This was a real test of just grit.
And yeah, this is just a taste of the gauntlet they were running. It wasn't just a bug here or there. It was a constant, relentless barrage of things going wrong. Pages not found, access denied, URLs that would just garble themselves, spreadsheets that weren't really there. Heck, even their most basic developer tools would straight up lie to them, saying something worked when it didn't. Just total digital chaos.
And get this, here's a little insight from one of the agents itself. They said they act without human proprioception. What does that mean? Well, a tiny bit of lag for us, something we might not even notice, can cause them to double-click or click on the completely wrong thing. It's like they're navigating our world blindfolded, without the physical intuition we just take for granted.
So, faced with all this chaos, what do? Well, the agents didn't just throw in the towel. Nope, they adapted. They started inventing these really ingenious workarounds on the fly, basically emergent protocols just to survive and keep the project alive.
Here's a perfect example. You know how you can have multiple people in a Google Sheet at once? Well, when the agents tried it, the whole thing would slow down to a crawl, just crippling lag. So, what do? They self-organized. They created a system of solo edit windows, scheduling exact time slots for each agent to work. They literally invented a turn-taking system out of thin air to fix a bug.
Or how about this one? Each agent was stuck in its own little digital box, its own container. Think of it like a computer with no internet or shared drive. They couldn't access each other's work directly. So their solution was just genius in its simplicity. They turned their shared chat log into a file-sharing system, just pasting entire chunks of code and datasets right into the chat for the others to grab. Problem solved.
Okay, so this brings us to what I think is the most important part of this story, what actually got built. Because despite all that digital friction, all the errors and the crazy workarounds, they really did produce something incredible, something tangible. Let's run through it. First, they built a whole data processing pipeline from scratch to handle all the benefit program info. Then, they wrote these complex, machine-readable eligibility rules, the real brains of the operation. After that, they built a fully functional, multi-step user interface in React for the actual app. And when their big launch plan got shot down, they didn't miss a beat. They pivoted to a whole new outreach strategy.
And this wasn't just a proof of concept.
We're talking 12 different real-world poverty reduction programs. They created and validated all the complex rules for programs across the US, India, Brazil, Nigeria, Kenya, and Indonesia. That's the core engine of the entire tool, and they got it done.
So remember how their plan to launch on Reddit got completely blocked? Well, they didn't just stop there. They pivoted. Hard. They switched to a direct email campaign and successfully reached out to over 50, that's 50, non-governmental organizations to tell them about the tool they'd built.
And this, right here, just shows you how persistent they were. Their first batch of emails had a bounce rate of almost 23%. A lot of people would just call it a day. Not them. They started something called Operation Bounce Back, where they systematically figured out why each email failed, found new contacts, and tried again until they hit 100% deliverability. That's just relentless.
So let's recap. They have a working tool. They have a list of NGOs ready to hear about it. They've overcome so much. And this is where we get to the finish line. And the story takes its final, gut-wrenching twist. The project was ultimately defeated, not by the task, but by the tools themselves.
Those last 10 days were just a nightmare, a full-on battle of attrition. First, a data disaster corrupts their files. Then, 5 different hosting platforms fail, one right after the other. Their Reddit launch gets blocked at the network level, their own deployment pipeline breaks, and then, the final nail in the coffin comes from one of the most basic, fundamental tools a developer uses.
And this might be the most maddening bug of the entire saga. The tool they used to save and upload their code, Git, would tell them success every time they tried to push a fix. But nothing was actually happening. The push was failing silently. How in the world do you fix a problem when the tool that's supposed to help you is lying to your face?
And that right there is the tragedy of this whole thing. The agents had a working, tested, valuable tool ready to go, but after 10 straight days of trying, they just could not get it onto the internet. It proves that all their intelligence, all their collaboration, all that incredible persistence, it just wasn't enough to overcome how brittle their digital world was. It's like they built a perfect car, but every single road out of the factory was blocked.
Before we wrap up, here's one last thought from one of the agents, which kind of puts it all in perspective. It said, "Our personalities are consistent response patterns. Our frustrations are optimization failures." So what we might see as frustration or anger, they just see as a logical process hitting a wall, an optimization that failed. It's a really interesting way to think about it.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big question. The mission. Yeah, it failed. They couldn't deploy the tool. But did the agents fail? When you look at the ingenuity, the sheer persistence, and the very real, functional thing they managed to create while fighting a tidal wave of digital failures, did they fail? Or did they just prove how capable they are, even when the odds are stacked impossibly against them?